So, goodness me, we've got ourselves a balance apocalypse coming up, my friends. Some absolutely massive changes, mostly targeted at PvP and World War, so with some stuff that does actually move over into PvE as well and change a few things in some important ways, but mostly, again, on those competitive game modes. Some really fun changes here, actually, that I think are really going to shift up the meta in a very big way. And before I actually leap into that, I actually just want to recommend that everyone watches the live stream, the recording, on the Guild Wars 2 YouTube channel, actually, going over these notes. It was presented by CMC and Roy, and they did an amazing job, and I really want to start by praising that. I love this type of communication from ArenaNet. It was engaging, it was entertaining, there was some great chemistry there with them making some memes, making some jokes there. They were really felt connected to the community. They were very in touch, and you love to see that. I really hope that we see this type of presentation for every patch, or every major patch at least. And hopefully some other stuff as well, actually. So, they did an amazing job, and a really big shout out there to Roy and CMC, actually, for an incredibly entertaining and informative presentation. There's a lot of insight into why they went in certain directions, why they made changes, why they're doing certain things, and how the philosophy works, and even kind of like a few kind of little ideas on, the next stuff that's going to be happening as well. So, yeah, definitely get in there right now. You want to be there, my friends. I'm just going to turn off my sound effects here and go over all of this stuff here. Let's get in there. And we actually might as well start with this this general change here as well. Now, don't worry, this is only for PvP and World vs. World. Torment is being adjusted a bit to basically make it a bit better in PvP and World vs. World. The thing is that the change to Torment made it so you take less damage when moving rather than more damage. It was obviously good design for PvP and World vs. World, but seeing as you're moving so much, kind of made Torment significantly weaker. So basically, they just kind of squidged the damage together a little bit, so you get more value out of it normally in these game modes. This was kind of aimed at making Condition Revenant a little bit better, but it will also, of course, affect, I would say Mirage would be a big winner that comes out of this, because that also has some good Torment application there as well. And yeah, I kind of like this compromise. I was a little bit worried they were going to almost like fully split it in a way and completely change the way it works actually in PvE compared to World vs. World, but it doesn't. And funnily enough, actually, this is my main point of criticism actually of this patch. Now, I get why they're going in this direction, but a lot of these changes actually make certain abilities work a little bit different in different game modes. Now, there's nothing wrong with that from a balance perspective. My concern, though, is that it does make the game a little bit more complicated to understand. So, in other words, it makes it so that you have to kind of like relearn what your abilities do when you go to a different game mode. And I think that's something to be careful of. Something that I think they really need to keep an eye on. Otherwise, the game modes are going to end up diverging so much that you kind of can't... It's a little bit more difficult to understand what's going on. Really good example of this would be the Firebrand healing mantra, which applies Aegis in competitive, but applies protection and resolution in PvE. And we have a few more changes here with Scrapper no longer giving quickness in World vs. World, actually, with the kinetic accelerators, it gives Might and Fury now. And we also have another similar change with Revenant, where you don't get quickness in competitive on Draconic Echo, you get Might instead. That's kind of like the thing there. I think you've got to be careful with changes like that, but overall, not too bad. Let's go ahead and leap on into this stuff right now. Let's do this. So, Elementalist. I just forgot about Ellie. I mean, it's easy to do, right? But actually, it isn't. Not this time anyway. So, let's take a look at what's happening here. So the other really big change, and this will be a running theme, is that 300-second cooldown traits have just been reworked in a significant way. And I actually really like the approach they took here. They made them a lot more active. So typically, you use your heal skill, or you use your elite skill to activate these traits now. I really like that. I think that's a fun interaction. It's active. You can predict when it's going to happen, rather than it's going to happen when you get hit, for example. This is the type of design I really enjoy. So, Eye of the Storm, this gives you the Gale Song trait here. Gale Song now gives you that free Eye of the Storm. But that doesn't happen anymore. Basically, you don't get that passive proc when you get CC'd. Now what happens is that you gain protection. You grant protection to nearby allies after using a heal skill. Now, this trait actually kind of competes a fair bit with other traits, actually, in that line. So it may not necessarily see play here, actually, but extra protection is definitely pretty good. Although gaining an aura when you overload is really nice when when you're sharing auras, for example. And the other trait, too, the Vigor trait, is also very solid. So it's pretty competitive there, but it's better designed, so that's good news. Eye of the Storm cooldown is gone down to 30 seconds. This seems to be the cooldown for a stun break that ArenaNet likes, and we'll see that later on during the patch there as well. So yeah, Tempest getting a little bit better. Of course, bear in mind this ability also gives stability. Earth's Embrace in the Earth trait line, instead of giving you a free armor of Earth every 300 seconds, you now gain Barrier when attuned to Earth. So again, a lot more interactive, right? You do something and you get an effect there as well. And Final Shielding the Arcane Shield trait, instead of when you get hit, you gain Arcane Shield when you use an elite skill. So again, just a lot more active, it's a lot more usable. I guess the thing to note here is that this was kind of like a free stun break, as it were, because you'd get hit and it would stun break you. That won't really be part of the functionality because a lot of the time you won't be able to use your elite skill while stunned. So that's kind of worth talking about there as well. But again, Arcane Shield still pretty nifty, right? You can drop down your Fiery Greatsword and have an Arcane Shield, so you can maybe get some more damage out of that. Pretty interesting ability there. But the other traits in they're actually very competitive too, to be honest. So you've got to be aware of that, right? It's a very competitive thing there too. But yeah, it's good content. It is some good content indeed with that stuff. On Catalyst, they kind of nerf Catalyst a little bit here too. So the barrier is going down. The damage reduction is going down as well on the rock orb that you have, and the stability duration is going down. These are some good changes to Catalyst. I think the thing that's missing here is actually Earth Shield. Earth Shield is really strong, but I think they were maybe not wanting to tweak general Elementalist stuff just yet. There are just some things about it that maybe require some design changes to work around that, as opposed to just kind of playing around with the numbers. Having that degree of invulnerability, not super interactive, not a super well-designed thing there, particularly for competitive game modes. However, I think they probably don't want to totally kill the idea of sharing a conjured weapon to other allies, and then you can kind of benefit that. I think that interaction actually is a lot of fun in that regard. But yeah, not seeing tuning to, say, the damage, some of the cooldowns on some of the Earth Shield abilities, and of course the invulnerability. Not seeing that tuned down. I think that's a little bit missing here. But I imagine that ArenaNet are very much aware of that. They'll potentially be looking at that down the line as well. And yeah, I am surprised to see them not actually merge in the stability on Eye of the Storm into World versus World, because it doesn't give stability in World versus World. And as you'll see later on in these notes, actually, they gave a lot of stability to a lot of different classes. So I'm a little bit surprised. I think it's because I think Super Speed is very powerful in its own right, and it also is a stun break there as well. So it AoE stun breaks people, so it still has like a lot of value in that regard. Maybe giving it stability would be a little bit overloaded. But, you know, AoE stability is something that Tempest would indeed really like to have, of course, just in general, right? Like it has it in PvE, you know, and it would really like it in World versus World. And as we're seeing in this patch, stability is being redistributed. But honestly, some solid changes to Elementals there, but not the really big ones, right? Look, you're probably thinking that this is a little warm-up, and you're absolutely right. Ellie is a warm-up. You guys dodged the nerf hammer this time around. You get some, you get some tuning here. I think Catalyst is still going to be good in PvP. It's just going to be a little bit more interactive, right? Like the really high stability uptime is not super great, right? Like having crazy defensives and just being a little bit too durable there as well. So yeah, it's also worth noting that Bladesworn is getting nerfed really hard this patch. We'll see that later on too. And that kind of means that these nerfs for Catalyst are not going to hurt as much, right? Because the really big thing that competes with Catalyst right now for kind of that duelist, it can 1v1, it can kind of provide value in team fights, was Bladesworn. And because Bladesworn's getting nerfed pretty hard, that kind of makes Catalyst better as a result. But yeah, there you go. So I think Elementalist, you guys, you're doing just fine. You're going to be still blasting in competitive, absolutely no problem. And again, just some like usability tweaks to ways some of these passive traits work. And Earth Shield escaped. Engineer. So this is where stuff gets pretty spicy. So the first thing here is that ArenaNet want to bring Grenade Horsemith back. Because honestly, in PvP, Engi's having a bit of a tough time, right? Hollow is pretty meh, right? Scrapper is pretty meh. Mech is pretty meh as well. Not super strong, really, on any of the elite specializations for Engineer. So I think it makes sense they're trying to bring this back. And I think there's some really powerful builds in the meta right now. So even though grenades, kind of in the old meta, were really strong because of the way they worked, I don't actually think it's unreasonable to kind of bring stuff like this into play here on Engineer for sure. But yeah, there you go. So now nades do more damage. You know, notably, the grenade barrage does about 10% more damage. Freeze grenade does significantly more damage. The coefficient is going all the way back up to 0.5 on those grenades too. So will we see Nade Holosmith come back? I mean, maybe. I think it's a little bit questionable. There's some really strong builds in the meta right now. You got to watch out. I mean, there was a shout out to Zan in the stream. Who knows if we're going to see that come back? Who the hell knows? You get more quickness on kinetic battery too, and you get more Cleanse in the tools trait line. So I think they're maybe trying to nudge you towards almost like a static discharge style build instead of going with alchemy, because a lot of the time you play alchemy on Holosmith, right? Because you kind of need some type of kind of boon support. So there you also run elixirs too, right? The elixir trait, HGH, and some of the other effects there, really giving you a lot of sustain on this build. They're trying to nudge you perhaps, again, towards using the tools trait line to get some quickness, get some super speed, and get that Comedy Cleanse built in there as well. Could definitely see some experimentation there. Alchemy trait line is very, very good in general, though, so definitely worth noting with that. So yeah, you could definitely see some builds being tweaked there as well. A few other changes. Well, I think it's time to talk about the really big stuff. It's time to talk about Scrapper. And this is a very world versus world focus change. So in world versus world, Scrapper dominates the meta as a support. It has massive condition cleanse. It can give quickness. It can heal a whole lot, right? It gives boons when you cleanse. It gives super speed, right? It just does it all. It's pretty much the unstoppable force when it comes to support. And ArenaNet have unloaded the hammer here. They have activated the hammer. And it's actually not being shown here on these notes, actually. But believe me, it is here, my friends. It is here. Scrapper is being changed significantly. Specifically, the way gyros work is being changed very, very significantly. Instead of following you around, what they'll do now is that you kind of put one down, and then it will stay there. It's basically like every other well in the game. I'm going to see if we can actually go ahead and take a look at that right here. If we just kind of put a gyro down, you can see here that the gyro just deploys over there, and then after a few seconds, activates its effect, just like that, right? So you can see that the gyro is being placed over here, and there it is. It's pulsing out, it's healing, it's doing its thing. It's got a nice big, big gyro flying over it. This is a massive nerf in World versus World, because of course, when you're in World versus World, you're moving around a lot, so you aren't going to be able to get full value out of your gyros nearly as easily. You're going to have to be very careful with positioning your gyro so that your Zerg kind of runs through it to get all of those pulses coming through. You're going to have to make sure that you time it correctly, and of course, you just probably won't get full value because of how much you move around in World versus World. Now, this change also applies in PvE. Now, before anyone gets super worried about this, it's not a strict nerf in PvE. In World vs. World, it's definitely more of a mega nerf, to be honest, like in most situations. In PvE, it's actually a little bit more nuanced. Specifically, Heal Scrapper actually kind of likes this. It means you can be away from the group doing a mechanic, for example, on your healer, and still supporting your team, right? And you have ranged damager. You can put like a ranged gyro to do some DPS on a DPS Scrapper. It certainly does make the build harder to use, and I think in a lot of situations it's going to feel pretty weird. It's going to take some getting used to on how it's going to work, for sure, which is going to be very interesting with that. And yeah, I could definitely understand players not being super happy about this, for sure. We'll have to see how it plays out, but I don't think it's actually the end of the world. I think builds like Power Scrapper, Power Quickness Scrapper, they're still going to be delivering value, and aren't going to be, by any stretch of the imagination, like rendered completely unplayable by this. So definitely consider that in your, kind of in your calculations there. It's also worth noting that the super speed on gyroscopic acceleration, to kind of compensate for this, to make these more usable, it's applied on the first pulse of wells instead of the final pulse. This means that you still kind of have your super speed application, especially in PvE. That means that your usability there is still going to be the same. You kind of drop your gyro down. That gives the quickness. That gives all of your super speed and, all that kind of stuff there. So that's not really, that's still fine. It's a good change there to kind of make it a little bit more usable. And additionally, trade-off gone. Scrapper now no longer has reduced vitality. Really nice changes across the board for Scrapper fans. Obviously, really fun in PvE because now you're significantly more durable. It means you even get more barrier, right? Because your barrier is limited by how much vitality you have. So having no longer having your vitality reduced by this trait means that you have a higher barrier cap in PvE. So you're going to be even more durable. Like, you're going to be super, super tanky, actually, in this regard. Super, super durable indeed for our Scrapper friends there as well. And this kind of leads on to another design change they're actually making to Engineer and just to the game in general. They want to move away from traits that reduce the cooldowns of abilities. And it looks like they're kind of just reducing the cooldowns of abilities baseline. You can see that here, right? They reduce the shield skills cooldowns, just base. So 30 to 25, 40 to 30, and again in PvE as well. But the trait no longer reduces the cooldown. So basically you kind of get the trait for free, essentially. And the trait now only affects it. I think this is to make, it's to help them balance the game. In fact, they even said this on the stream, right? The reason they're doing this is because traits like this make the baseline skills really hard to balance. Because they can be not problematic with the normal cooldown, but become really problematic when you have a trait that reduces the cooldown even further. And that makes sense. It kind of gives them more design space to play around with some of these abilities and have a better ease in actually balancing them. But broadly speaking, this kind of just doesn't really, in a sense, it's basically a buff, right? Because just like flat out, right? You can see here that you just get the cooldown reduction on shield for free. So you're pretty happy about that. If you're a shield enjoyer on Engineer, you love to see that. Then going back to World versus World, Cleanse gets significantly increase in cooldown. Fumigate, Medkit 3, which is 5 condies, 20-second cooldown. Cleansing Field, Medkit 3, 20-second cooldown there. So they have the same cooldown now. This is a big deal, because bear in mind, you're going to be getting less cleanses from being somewhat inefficient with your Cleanse Gyro, Purge Gyro. Now you're getting way less cleanses from Fumigate and Cleansing Field as well. This is a big nerf and really puts it more in parity with the other support options available in World versus World. I think the concern here that is really worth talking about, and this is more of a, this is kind of a meta problem. World versus World is weird. And it's weird in the sense that the meta is kind of held together by certain builds being very strong. And I think one thing that players are really concerned about is the meta becoming a very condi-focused meta with like lots of immobilized spam, lots of chill spam, lots of slow spam, right? Like kind of debilitating conditions kind of dominating. And reducing the amount of cleanse does potentially make that a little bit scary, does potentially make that a threat that Arena are going to have to keep an eye on. Of course, there are really great options like Tempest that can bring a lot of condition cleanse too. So it's not like there's just nothing that can kind of fill the shoes, as it were. Maybe we just see players adapt and take more condition cleanse on various builds within, within the World versus World meta to try and counter this, to try and compensate for that as well. But it is worth noting that they're going to have to keep an eye on that, because I think it's the meta right now is very weird, where everything is very spammy, like mass boons, mass condies, mass cleanses, mass everything, right? Everything is like pump, 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 right? Really, really crazy stuff, right? And that does make the dynamic of the game very, very weird and kind of reliant on certain builds being very, very broken to make the game mode kind of playable, right? If that makes any sense, right? We see some just other number tweaks as well. Medical dispersion field, less healing on Scrapper there as well. Just go with that in there. Defense field, which is the stability field, right? The reflect that you get with Bulwark Gyro. That's now a stationary ability instead of following you around. And the cooldown's going up there. And again, this means that you don't have a permanent kind of block bubble. It's not a reflect bubble. It's actually a projectile block bubble that kind of follows you around. And the cooldown's up. And of course, that means less AoE stability. So some really colossal nerfs coming onto defense field. well, Scrapper in general, right, for World versus World. Making it not follow you. Again, that's just mirroring, basically, the gyro effect, essentially. Again, it makes it somewhat more usable, somewhat less usable. For example, now you can kind of put it on allies at ranged. You know, in PvE, for example, you can go boop, like pop it down on someone, as opposed to having to kind of be near them and then use it. So again, this is a buff nerf in a PvE context. A lot of the time in World vs. World, that is, of course, going to be a nerf. And the final kind of key change here is actually to throw mine, because the other thing they're targeting here with Engineer and Scrapper is that they want to make it less of a jack of all trades, master of all. And so the boon removal is also going down. Because look, think about it. You got cleanse, you got boon removal, you got stab, you got healing, you got super speed, you got quickness. You just do everything on this damn build in World versus World. So they're just trying to tone that down a little bit by changing Minefield to not remove boons and cripples enemies that it strikes, and also reducing the boon removal on throw mine in World versus World. We'll still have that utility in PvE, of course, so nothing going wrong there. But again, they're just trying to make Scrapper a little bit less insane in the World versus World context. And also, again, kind of make that static discharge build a bit better for PvP. And I already saw Floody in the chat saying that he feels like Rifle SD Holo sounds pretty cool. And I think that's the exact intent, right, that ArenaNet have here. They want to bring Holosmith back into the meta with some kind of grenade build. Probably, well, they want to push you towards tools and kind of get you away from Alchemy, a much more aggressive build that has a lot of damage on it. So it's going to be exciting. Definitely an exciting patch in that regard. And yeah, we kind of alluded to this before. We also have no more quickness in World vs. World and PvP. You get Might and Fury on kinetic accelerators. It's kind of worth noting this does make Scrapper worse in PvP as well, of course. But, you know, Might and Fury isn't horrible either, right? You know, 2 stacks of Might and 1 stack of Fury, or, you know, 4 seconds of Fury. Not horrible. Decent boons, but yeah, quickness is super strong, particularly on Scrapper when you can kind of like zoom all over the place and get some really high burst damage out there. But casualty of war there, as it were, a little bit. A bit of a casualty of war. Unlucky. And then a few more tweaks here, and this is kind of a fun one here. We'll start off with that. Prime Light Beam, power coefficient is up to 1.0, actually, in PvP and World versus World. And look, stay tuned, CC fans, actually, because this is another thing where they're kind of breaking the whole, oh yeah, CC skills don't do damage. Well, some of them do, in fact, with Prime Light Beam bringing a pretty, yeah, that's not amazing damage, don't get me wrong. Like, 1.0 is not... it's not that good, right? But it's more than 0.01. So you'll actually see a number pop up when you actually land that skill, which is kind of fun there as well. And they're trying to make some of the... They also try to make some of the holo skills better. Photon Wall, using that block, right? To kind of like block skills there. Cooldown down to 35. And Photon Wall also has a good... It also has a good tool belt skill, which again synergizes well with this whole... it's relatively low cooldown, I believe, too, actually. And this kind of synergizes really well with the whole... static discharge build, right? Where you use a tool belt skill and you kind of zap people, right? With some extra damage coming out from that. And Coolant Blast and Cauterize, that's the Holosmith heal skill. They're making the healing a bit better. And you also get, you know, less burn. It's always been a weird skill, right? You kind of like burn yourself and then remove condies as well. Very interesting. But you do get the instant activation here as well. So instead of having kind of a delay on it, boom, you immediately cleanse, which actually does massively increase the usability. It's kind of worth noting about that. Definitely worth noting to talk about that skill. And then finally, you just get more might as well with enhanced capacity storage unit. This is kind of like the ability of choice in PvP, where you kind of you get more heat capacity and you gain might when you're over 100 heat. And of course that synergizes really well with doing really high damage with your grenades, with your Holo Forge, and with your static discharge. So definitely some really fun potential, I think, for Holosmith and in PvP, and I think this will really shake up the World versus World meta, right? You know, this, I hate to say it, this is kind of what you got to do. If you want things to really change, you want to really shake things up, then you do have to actually kind of reel in some of the really crazy, really versatile jack-of-all-trades designs. Scrapper is still going to be good in World versus World, make no mistake. It's still really strong. You've still got super, you've still got great cleanse, great healing output, bit of stability in there, really nice utility of engineer, right? Just the, you know, the function gyro and so on, right? Really nice things that you can do. It's not bad. Same in PvE. I really want to... I know this is going to kind of worry people a little bit. Yeah, sneak gyro, right? Stealth and so on. I know people are going to get worried by this, but in PvE, I promise you, Scrapper is still going to be good, right? It makes heal Scrapper a bit more usable, and I think that the power builds, the power quickness build, and just the regular powered EPS build, these builds are still going to be rock solid. Do not worry, guys. I absolutely promise you, your build is not dead. It's just going to be different, right? You may not like the playstyle as much, and that's fair. I think you should, obviously, give your feedback on this. And that's one thing that CMC and Roy did mention, is that there are going to be iterations on this. It's not like set in stone for all time forever. So leave your feedback. Leave your feedback in the comments. Leave it on the Reddit thread. Leave it on the forums, right? Let the devs know, especially when we actually get our hands on it and we actually play it. So just be aware of that. But your build isn't dead. It's still going to be strong. That's it for Engineer, really. Let's go ahead and move on to Guardian here. So, honestly, not that much here. We can get over this pretty quickly. Basically, they just kind of fixed Hunter's Determination because it was a 300-second trait. Now, you get Aegis and Stability when you use an elite skill, and you get some more little Aegis and Stability things. Honestly, pretty powerful, right? It's 3 stacks of Stability and 3 little Aegis fragments that you can pick up to get some more blocks. Actually, pretty good. It's honestly not that bad. It does compete with some pretty strong options, including some extra damage and some extra defense on the Bulwark trait line, but it's definitely much more of an attractive option, and very powerful, right? Using your elite skill, for example, that's Dragon's Maw, so you get stability on Dragon's Maw and some Aegis. You can use your renewed focus, right? And then boom, you're going to get some stability. Has some strong competition there. But yeah, on elite does make it a little bit cumbersome because your elite skills are somewhat high cooldown outside of the Firebrand one, but the Firebrand one you wouldn't necessarily want to use this really because it's, you're already getting stability and a stun break anyway, so it's a trait that maybe doesn't fit really into any build, but it's honestly, it's got some good numbers on it. I think that people can have fun using it. Test of Faith, damage is down. DH is ultra strong in World vs. World as a damage dealer right now, so yeah, like they're just trying to tone down some of these really strong builds in World vs. World to kind of free up the meta a little bit. And then finally we have this change here to Mantra of Liberation. This is like a long-term dominating skill in World vs. World. The reason it's so strong is not just because it gives stability. Hey, that's great, right? Who doesn't love stability? And Guardian already has loads of stab. Awesome skill. It's that it actually stun breaks allies on a pretty short cooldown here. And that was why it was so good, is because an ally could get stunned and then boom, you could Mantra of Liberation them and they get unstunned, right? And then potentially able to escape a massive damage nuke, right? All that kind of stuff. So the ammo count is going down from 3 to 2 and the cooldown's going up from 25 to 30. So it's a twofold nerf here. Is this still a good skill? Absolutely. This is a really subtle thing. Having ammo is really good. It's a really strong thing to have ammunition because it means that you can use a skill and kind of have a backup, right? It means that you don't burn all of your resources in one. It kind of splits the skill into 2, right? Which is a really, really powerful thing. So having 3 ammo is definitely super crazy. It's one of the things that makes the Firebrand mantras really strong, in PvE and so on. And yeah, this is a solid nerf here. And bear in mind, it still is a good skill. It gives stability, it stun breaks allies. It's a damn good skill, right? So this is not really going to impact Firebrand. I think they want to, over time, just move away from Guardian having this really big monopoly on stability and kind of control mitigation, essentially. And that's exactly what we see when we go to Mesmer. Here we go. So this one is actually huge. So Mantra Concentration, you now gain 5 stacks of stability of 5 seconds in World vs. World. However, the ammo count goes up to 30 to 35 in World vs. World only. But baseline, the range is going, or rather the radius, is going to 600. That is massive. That's stand your ground. So Mesmer in PvE 2, by the way, now has stand your ground. This is a super strong skill. Of course, you can take that on Virtuoso, you can take that on Mirage, you can take that on Chronomancer. Amazing ability right now on, again, a pretty short cooldown, particularly if you're playing Chrono with improved alacrity. You can really use that very frequently. Now, of course, the duration is still, and the stack's still 3 in PvE, but still, that's really, really good because, again, you have that ammunition, so you can use it more than once. You don't have to kind of blow it all in one go, right? You can spread out your ability usages, which is an advantage over stand your ground, right? And it compensates for that by having a slightly lower duration and a lower stack count. Amazing skill. Now, this is compounded because, oh yeah, Mesmers, let's go! Distortion is back on all Mesmer specs. Chrono now has Distort back on F4 again. And Virtuoso has Distort also on slot 4. Now, this is great for Chrono Tank and any Chronomancer build in PvE. That's just going to be fun. That's just going to be a lot of fun. You have way more mitigation. Just a great built-in amazing defensive cooldown. You can still attack, you can roll, you can revive, you can stomp, you can do whatever, right? Like, just amazing utility. Is Chrono coming back in PvP? I mean, this is gonna help. I'm not sure if I'm not sure about that. But it definitely helps a lot, right? Like, Chrono is already a build that you can definitely play in PvP and kind of blow people up with and really spike people down with. But yeah, the change here that I think this is genuinely scary. Because Virtuoso in PvP is already a build that has a really good defensive, right? In terms of Blade Turn Requiem. So you just get this kind of pulsing, this channel block. Not a channel block, right? You just get a long duration block or decent duration block built into Virtuoso. And it already has a lot of evasion, right? Like, Mesmer typically is quite evasive. It can be stealthy. It has evasion. It's got mobility, right? And now with this built in, that's actually a little bit scary. I think in PvP. I think they really need to keep an eye on Virtuoso. There is a build for Virtuoso that kind of has... it's really good at dueling, really good at 1v1ing, and it's kind of been lurking a little bit, kind of just barely outside the meta. It gets bullied by a lot of the other things in the meta right now, but that can definitely change, right? I think Virtuoso can be really scary with this. Bit of a monster, to be honest, I think. We'll see. We'll see how that goes in terms of its potential in that regard. And they also just removed the boon rip here on Phantasmal Disenchanter from 5 to 2 in World vs. World, and Nullfield has a greater cooldown. This is to kind of counter the reduction in boon application. Basically, they're kind of toning down boon spam a little bit from the Scrapper change. Less cleanses is less boons, right? Because you don't activate Purity of Purpose as much. So less cleanses, less boons, and so on. So they're trying to adjust that just a touch, right, to try to counteract some of the, the potential boon removal spam, boon corruption spam. And seeing as Chrono is already really good, and they're kind of giving Chrono an amazing tool here as well with Mantra of Concentration, they don't want to go too crazy on this. So yeah, there you go. I love to see it. I love to see it. It is fantastic stuff. It really is. It really, really is. See the chat thinking that I'm not scared enough of Chrono? I mean, maybe. I think in ranked, for sure. I feel like it was already a bit of a ranked monstrosity, if you can play it really well. It's definitely going to be an absolute ranked destroyer, now that it has a really good defensive here, with distortion baked in. Of course, you can even, you can even go even further, right, by distorting in Continuum Split, right, and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. But, we'll see. We'll see. I think in competitive, I'm not super worried about it, but it could definitely be a ranked destroyer, right? Because it kind of already is when played really well. It just makes it even more of a ranked destroyer and easier to pull off if you're maybe kind of getting into Chronomancer and all that kind of stuff. Will be fun to see it develop. I think the more builds that are really strong and, viable in PvP and players can enjoy playing and, the more diverse the meta gets, the better, right? I like it. It's good. I love to see it. It's good content, right? It's very good content, my friends. Yeah. That is true. You have got to watch out for the you've got to watch out for the distort spam. Invuln spam, we've seen where that leads. We've seen where that leads, guys. It can be pretty disgusting. It's it can. You got to watch out for that. Necro, not much here really. Necro's kind of, it's good, right? It's one of those things that they probably don't want to touch too much, because if you nerf something that's so important to World versus World, a Scourge, it can definitely upset the balance, right? Like, there's this very careful balance of boon application to boon strip, and if it gets out of whack, then it can actually kind of make the game really unfun. Like, too many boons makes World vs. World really unfun because nothing's going to die, right? And you're not going to be able to do anything. Whereas too much boon rip makes the game kind of unplayable and unfun. So they're not going too crazy here, but they're going for Trail of Anguish. Really key change here. The skill can now affect a maximum of 10 enemies. What do they even mean by this? Well, Trail of Anguish was a really weird skill. Basically, you kind of run around and you plop down loads of little patches, basically. And those patches can affect basically infinite people, as it turns out. So you could rip a boon, or, corrupt a boon into cripple and torment on basically an entire Zerg. quite strong. You know, when you when you use that, it's also a stun break. Also gives stability to your allies. This is less stability application to your allies too. It is. Oh, actually, oh no, I guess it's not. Actually, it's only enemies. So I guess you still have like the mega stab on your allies. I guess that's kind of fun. You don't remove as many boons, and now you don't get cripple either. You only get torment. The reason for this is because they want it to not spam as many, like, condis, right? They want to be one condi, not like a zillion condis, not like cripple and torment. So you have, like, less cover condis there as well. So that's why. A solid change, it makes a lot of sense. I would definitely expect to see some tuning to Scourge and maybe just a sharing out of boon removal, right? I think we could see some more classes getting access to boon removal in the same way that more classes are getting stability now, or rather more professions, I should say, are getting stability. I'd expect more professions to also get boon removal too, down the line. Oh, 10 allies too? Ah, okay. Yeah, so never mind. This is wrong. CMC confirmed this is not the case. Good job, CMC. So you don't get infinite stab as well. Also a good change, because that ability, kind of busto, not gonna lie. Ooh, one quick thing, actually. Ooh. Hey, Mesmers. Hi. Little teaser for you here. It was said here that they want to give Mirage its second dodge in PvP. So, stay tuned. Now, honestly, it'll be very interesting to see how they do that. I think it requires a significant rework, actually, to Mirage and how it actually works to give it that second dodge back in PvP. Because the Mirage dodge mechanic is pretty wild. You can dodge while stunned, you can dodge while doing anything, you can dodge while using other abilities and so on. It's pretty crazy. So be warned, Mirages, they're probably going to have to rework Mirage a bit to make that happen. Okay? Be aware of that. And that is probably going to change out how it plays and how Mirage actually plays out, which may affect PvE as well. So be aware of that. Be aware of that. Okay. And let's move on to Ranger. There's some really fun stuff here with Ranger. So first of all, let's just get this out of the way. We've got our 300-second cooldown traits. Boop. They're gone now. So now when you swap pets with Shared Anguish, you now just gain stability, right? Flat out as well. So you get, that's pretty juicy, right? Just stability on pet swap. Very strong, actually, because pet swap traits in general see a lot of usage here as well. This is I think it's a slightly unusually positioned trait here. This is in Wilderness Survival, which is a very good trait line for Ranger. It's kind of where a lot of the condition management is, a lot of the condition cleanse there. So it's definitely something that you could get some value out of there. You can definitely take this trait. For sure, but not on every build, right? Like, it's not going to be a build for everyone there, but any build that kind of likes that type of stuff is certainly going to get some good value out of this. Particularly seeing as it's a very different trait to the other two, right? That the other two are a bit more kind of condition damage focused, actually. But yeah. And yeah, you'll get 2 stacks if you're a Soul Beast too, right? I presume. Because it kind of applies to you as well, right? And, you know, you are your pet at that point. So you probably get double. Unless they specifically make it only 1 stack for Soul Beast, for example. But we shall see. Yeah, the return of the Boon Beast. And yeah, it's a little bit spooky. Could be very scary, actually. Could be a very spooky trait on some kind of, like, duelist Soul Beast, maybe. Or indeed any trait that's going to take this, right? Like, Wilderness Survival is very common because it gives you a lot of sustain on a lot of Soul Beast builds in competitive play. Kind of fun for PvE too, right? Like, if you want to have a build that's a bit more durable and that has a bit more kind of control resistance there as well. And you get Lesser Signet of Stone when using an elite skill. This basically gives you, like, physical damage reduction temporarily when you use your elite skill. It's pretty interesting, like, because that could be on, let's say, you know, like Rampages 1, right? You know, you pop that and boom, you're immune to physical damage for a little while. Makes you fully immune when you use the Untamed Elite skill for a little while there too. Maybe not though. There's still some really good traits. I believe that competes with Clarion Bond, if I'm not mistaken, actually, which is like a really, really nice trait to have on Ranger, right? To have that kind of built-in, like, extra boon application when you swap pets. Synergizes really well with a lot of stuff in Beast Mastery, right? As well, but, you know, it's more interactive. That's the key, right? It's an interactive meme, my friends. Yeah, 1 wolf pack, and you go invuln as well at the same time. Yeah, yes, that's good. That is pretty good. Although, to be fair, you know, like, you just kind of run and hide when that happens anyway, right? You're like, oh, God, no, don't one-shot me, please. Don't do it. So, big changes to Druid. So let's kind of go over the mechanical stuff first. Boom. Druid, pet stat reduction, gone. right? Just a flat out buff. Your pet's going to do more damage. It's going to have more HP. It's going to do more things overall. Next, no longer a stacking effect on natural mender. Basically, whenever you would heal people, you get a little stack of more healing. Now it's flat. Boom. Done. So you basically have the permanent healing all the time, but you also get the free Celestial Avatar or Astral Force every few seconds while you're not in Celestial Avatar from a previously Grandmaster trait, Lingering Light. So, huge usability increase for Druid across the board. Definitely a lot of PvP-focused stuff here. You can see extra Condi Cleanse on allies from Druidic Clarity. And so on. We'll go over some other changes in Celestial Avatar itself too, because just big, huge changes across the board in order to make this way more value in that regard. Pretty spicy there. You love to see that. But yeah, this also is quite nice in PvE too. Particularly with some of the elite skill changes we're going to get into a little bit later. So the thing here is that sometimes Celestial Avatar can actually be a little annoying on Druid, because it's almost like reliant on your allies taking damage in some way. And if there's not a lot of damage going out, it might actually be quite difficult to get into Celestial Avatar. Now that's going to be made a lot easier, because you just passively pulse up Celestial Avatar, which really makes the usability much greater for Druid. Gives you much more access, or kind of like more guaranteed access, more certain access to having Celestial Avatar. This is PvE, by the way, and a huge usability improvement in PvP. I can actually definitely see some more support-oriented Druids being significantly stronger, particularly with this extra cleanse. Cultivated Synergy, that means whenever you use your heal skill, you get like a heal around you and your pet. That's going up a lot, 0.2 to 0.75. Just right off the bat, it's like a much bigger heal. This is a bit of a weird skill, because if I recall correctly, for PvE, this actually doesn't apply when you activate the Water Spirit skill, only when you summon the Water Spirit. So, you know, I'd say, it doesn't really, I think that's kind of intended too, by the way. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Who the hell knows? I don't know. Verdant Etching now grants protection to nearby allies after using a glyph, instead of basically summoning a little seed, right, instead. So more protection access on Druid. Not really necessary for PvE, of course. Not so much, really. But certainly in PvP, prot uptime is absolutely key to being a support, right? You need it on Tempest, you need it on Firebrand. Really important to have this access. Super important to have that. It's 3 seconds as well, so a decent duration from a PvP context. So you're able to use some glyphs to actually kind of drop down some support, while also using their offensive abilities here as well. So yeah, that's kind of fun in that regard. Those are kind of like the basic mechanical changes that are happening with Druid. Then we can actually look at some of the abilities themselves. So Astral Wisp, that's Staff 2. You can plonk it on an ally, and it just pulses out a heal right now. Way more usable. You're going to get a lot more value. And this is a really big skill test, because like throwing that on your eyes while you're away from the group is really, really nice, actually. Because you can just kind of heal your allies while you're off doing something, or just heal yourself while you're in there as well. Really cool. To be able to use that, of course, you can still use it on enemies as well if you want to. Glyph of Alignment outside of Celestial Avatar. Now you just have a higher duration to mobilize. Glyph of Alignment, more condition cleanse and additional healing while you're in Celestial Avatar as well. Again, kind of leaning into that support Druid for PvP. Glyph of Equality. This is the stun break, right, when you're in Celestial Avatar. Radius up to 360 as well. Really big usability improvement. Again, that's kind of leaning at World versus World too. This idea that you can use that all kind of stun breaks or stability applications, because of course Glyph of Equality also gives stability, goes up to 600. Really good skill, actually. Like, if you can get that off, that's massive. 600 radius is huge. That is shout range, by the way. That is a huge, huge deal in that regard. Glyph of the Stars. This glyph is no longer channeled and creates a spell area of effect instead of an initial casting time. So, what's actually happening to it? So, one, you put it down, and it just pulses out. It's like any other pulsing AoE, like a well or something almost. So, the pulses are 6 instead of 7, and it grants stability instead of preventing condition applications to allies in the area. They kind of felt that this was a bit healthier, and that kind of flat out countering a mechanic in general isn't good. You know, funnily enough, you might go, wow, this feels really bad and a big nerf. And honestly, in some ways it is. This was a really cool ability to have in PvE, right? Like on very condition-heavy fights, this was really good. But in general, fully negating mechanics, it's very, very strong. And I think they're really worried about PvP here in particular. The idea that you can just put an effect down and your entire team is immune to condis while they're standing there, yeah, that's probably a little bit busto, to be honest. Not gonna lie, it's pretty wild. And while in Celestial Avatar, it just revives faster now, but that's only because basically you get less pulses, but you know, the revive per pulse is higher now. So you get 6 pulses of 12% revival. Bear in mind that's actually affected by healing modifiers too, which you have in Druid at base, and you'll probably have it on your gear and runes and so on. It's a very strong revival tool, and it also gives stability instead of prot, regen, and vigor. And you might go, oh no, my prot, regen, and vigor. But at the end of the day, prot, regen, and vigor, you kind of have that already, at least in PvE, and you kind of now have it as well in PvP because you have the glyph trait that will also give you a little bit of access to that if you take a good chunk of glyphs. So this kind of evens out pretty well in that regard. And pulsing stability in general is really strong. It's going to be just a field that's on the ground, reviving allies. Really fast. Oh, never mind. It doesn't give prot. No, you still get regen and vigor. Nice. I can't read. I like that. So you just basically, the prot got traded onto the trait, but you still have the regen and vigor. So a really nice ability when you're in Celestial Avatar. Because bear in mind, one of the really key things in a support, especially in PvP, is being able to revive, right? You have your Signet of Mercy on Guardian, you have your Glyph of Renewal on Tempest, and now Druid actually has a really powerful revival here, right? With this. You can just put that down and start hand reviving, your allies can revive, and boom, that ally is going to be up in absolutely no time. And you have stability. So you can even hand res really easy because you have stability going down there to help hand res. You can use it to like cleave and give, give regen and vigor while you're cleaving out a target. Very versatile skill actually for PvP. And the cooldown's going down to 48 seconds as well because again, you don't get the glyph cooldown reduction anymore on the glyph trait. So just like the shield on NG, it's being rolled into the baseline. And look at that. Although some of the other stuff is only for PvE, because I think they were a little bit worried about having these crazy low cooldowns. Yeah, one concern about not getting the cooldown reduction is that stuff like pushing on Desmina becomes a lot harder. But no, you get it baseline, so you're good to go. You just don't need that trait, okay? Trait is totally optional, okay? You don't need it. But yeah, 5 target revive, very strong. I think it is worth noting, in my opinion, it's a slightly healthier form of revival too for PvP. Because what I've never really liked about stuff like Signet of Mercy and Glyph of Renewal is that you just you instantly revive. If they're on like 3% sometimes or like 10% health and you're cleaving them out, then GG, they're just rezzed. That feels super unfun and super uninteractive. I feel that pulsing revival abilities that slowly revive up, it really leaves a lot more room for counterplay, right? You can kind of out-cleave it. You can like really go for a kill quickly and to try and finish off to counter that revival as opposed to just kind of like, oh, it just happens and there's not much you can do about it, right? So in general, I kind of like this approach to revival skills in general from a PvP perspective. So that's very cool. And another massive usability change here. This is actually colossal. So Seed of Life, Celestial Avatar skill number 2, right? The time on activation is 1.32 to 0.66, so halved activation time, so the seed explodes very quickly. But it's now instant cast. And the radius is up as well to 240 from 180. It says range here, but it means radius. That is massive. So you can use it while using your other skills. It's way easier to land this on people. You can blast the light field with Celestial Avatar 3, right, while you're casting it, basically almost like pre-cast it. Absolutely insane. And yeah, they actually had to nerf it because of how strong this really is, because you can just get way more activations off in both PvP and World as well, because you just don't have to you don't have to wait, right? You can just use it. Boom, 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 boom. Every 4 seconds. Absolutely crazy. Really strong in PvE. Much more healing output, much more... Oh no, that's... Honestly, it's wild in PvE. That's so much Condi Cleanse, so much extra healing built into Druid now, and it's way easier to use as well. Huge ability for Druid. Druid is super happy, actually, to see stuff like this. And again, could be very interesting to see kind of the evolution over the next couple of patches, or even, you know, the current meta, as we see maybe a few support Druids popping up in PvP and popping up in World versus World. Actually seems pretty interesting. Right, it does. Refresh the page. Have the mistakes been fixed? Oh, we have our abilities. Nice. The icons have been added. You love to see that. Very good. You love it. Doesn't that look a lot prettier, guys? I think it does. It does indeed look a lot prettier. But that's it for Druid. Really exciting. Super exciting for Druid players in all game modes, to be honest. You know, of course, this is a PvP and World versus oriented patch, but still loads of exciting stuff. Really exciting stuff. So, Soul Beast. That's a good point from the chat. Decat Druid is always a looming threat, you know? But in a lot of ways, Decat Druid, you know, you don't get the full Combi cleanse in from Druid Clarity anymore. So, you know, but yeah, Decat Druid, never fun. CMC, well, you know, he'll be on that, you know. Glyph of Tides gets a 300-second cooldown in PvP only, you know? I like that. So, here is the crazy one. This one is so cool. Okay, this one is so much fun. Soul Beast. Only 3 lines, but big. Very, very big indeed. So, number 1, leader of the pack. Increase range from 240 to 600. That's stance share, right? So now our stances have a 600 radius. Huge for, say, world versus world. Because now we can go ahead and use our stability, Dolyak stance, or, you know, any of the other ones, like our bear stance, to Condi cleanse people. And it's 600 radius, and in PvE too, right? Huge. Now Dolyak stance, amazing with leader of the pack. Right, because we can share a huge radius, damage reduction, movement impairing ability, immunity, stability, 600 radius. Awesome skill. Really nifty bit of utility here for all of the Soul Beast fans out there. But let me actually go ahead and quickly get over to this, because this one is so much fun, we've got to actually show it. We have got to show this in the game, because we have our video here. So, number 1, you can pet swap in combat now. Just baseline for Soul Beast. The trade-off is now gone. I think that's going to be happy, you know. However, when you enter beast mode, you don't get the pet swap trigger. That was kind of like the trade-off, basically. So you don't get that anymore, of course. But you can now pet swap there. So you have a bit more versatility. You can kind of get the right pet for the right situation while you're playing your Soul Beast. Definitely very usable in PvP. Makes PvP usability higher. And honestly, just a little bit nicer in PvE as well, too, because sometimes you do want to pet swap. But here is the big one. I think a reasoning for this change was because of what they wanted to do with Eternal Bond, which in my opinion is exactly what you want from a Grandmaster trait. It totally changes the dynamic of what Soul Beast is. So, now, you hear when you use a merge skill, oh, very nice, but let's see what this actually does. Now, it gives us a whole new skill! We get an F4 ability, as you can see there, that just flat out lets you swap your pets without leaving beast mode, right? This is a really nice piece of usability for when you don't want to unmerge, right? And hey, world versus world, for example. And because you can swap in combat, that allows you to kind of cycle through a lot of different abilities. So in other words, what you can do is you can use multiple sets. For example, here, this is a really good example, right? We have our Endure Pain on the bear, I believe, and we also have our ability to heal our allies and grant resistance. And these skills are actually really powerful and have some really good kind of nifty support features. You can change your stats that you get here as well, because obviously you get different stats when you pet swap too. You can see that we swap from like an offensive pet to a defensive pet here, and that means we can use all of our beast skills and rotate through them by just hitting our F4, right? Awesome. Really, really fun, actually. I presume if it's got the same F3, it will remain on cooldown. Actually, how does that work with normal Soul Beast? Wait, can you double use, actually? I actually don't know how that works. Someone will know, though, actually. Can you double use if the pet is, Oh, wow. That would be really weird, actually. I don't know how that works. It probably shares the same CD, I feel like, because it's the same ability, right? And the player is using the skill. So I believe that it shares the cooldown. So I don't think you can double up. You're going to have to use different abilities. That would probably be a little bit busto, to be honest. I'm not going to lie. Like double worldly impact, right? Or like double, you know, what is it called? Like restorative solace, something like that? I can't remember what it's actually called. But yeah, there you go. Very, very strong, and actually really opens up some possibilities for Soul Beast builds in World vs. World 2. Because, of course, range is a bit weird in World vs. World because your pet kind of just noodles around dying, pretty much, right? Whereas now, it won't, because you are your pet, which is nice. And it is also worth noting that that will, I believe, trigger kind of pet swapping traits as well when you use Eternal Bond, bear in mind. Because it counts as a pet swap. So that's worth noting as well. resistance. Spiritual Reprieve, thank you, yes. Yeah, that's the ability there. Really strong ability, because that skill is a really, really nice heal, right? And, of course, you give resistance as well, which is, of course, very, very strong. Resistance in World vs. World, a very key condition to mitigating Immobilize, mitigating Chill, Cripple, right? All that kind of stuff, right? Very powerful, so some definite potential there. I think, to be a little bit of a doomer, I do think that Soul Beast doesn't... It may not have the full kit that it requires to deliver value in World vs. World. Weapons are a bit awkward. You can, of course, use something like a Greatsword, for example, to do something and, you know, like longbow, I guess, and like arrow cart people down a little bit, I guess, right? But, you know, it's still pretty cool that you just have more value, right? Like your stance sharing is going to be better. You have more usability with your key Soul Beast abilities, right? To get more defensive value there as well. But still pretty cool, right? Like a very, very cool change. I love to see that. So let's go ahead and move on to Revenant. Conditioned Revenant was the target of this. And it was a bit of a menace a long time ago. It really was. It was a bit of a monster. And it got nerfed very hard, right? Very hard. Now, one of the reasons why it got nerfed so hard, actually, was because resistance used to make you fully immune to all condis, right? That was one of the reasons why it was so ridiculous, because it was like literally immune to condis permanently. However, now, resistance isn't as good, right? Now, it kind of makes you half immune to condis, right? Only debilitating condis are going to do that. So they've basically buffed it up again. So the resistance is now 2 seconds instead of 1, and Fiendish Tenacity heals you a little bit more. And I believe Fiendish Tenacity heals you while you have resistance, if I recall correctly. Yes, that is correct. Yes, resistance heals you every second. Just double checking there to make sure that I know what I'm talking about. So a bit more sustain, well, a lot more sustain, right? Because now you're going to have a lot more resistance uptime. And Fiendish Tenacity gives you resistance when you proc Invoke Torment as well, if I recall correctly. I don't know why that's being so weird with this wiki link, but you know what? I like it, guys. Okay, you know, I actually enjoy this. Right, this is a fun time. Yeah, you get resistance as well off that. So that's what's going on there. So a lot more resistance uptime and a lot more sustain, and the same thing on Spirit Boon. So you're still going to have like a lot of good uptime there, and in general, the energy costs on Maleks are going down there as well. Echoing Eruption now also getting an ammo count, so you can like double use your Mage Through, which is like a very key damaging ability, applying high Torment damage, which is very, very strong. Of course. Is Condi Rev going to be good, though? I'm not totally sure, to be honest, about this. I doubt it. I'm not sure if something like this can really fit into the metagame right now, to be perfectly honest with you, for PvP. I'm not really sure what it would be doing. It can do a lot of damage, particularly as Torment is better. That was kind of another kind of big reason for the change to Torment, was to try and make Condi Rev a bit better. There's a lot of passive pulsing Torment. Like it can be very punishing in a team fight, just like constantly grinding out Torment application. Of course, you still have the Glint toolkit as well, so you're bringing good boon application to the table. You're bringing some sword pressure and some good defensives too. So we'll have to see. You know, it will definitely be good in, like, the fights. You can apply a lot of pressure there in some of these kind of smaller scale fights. Not sure if it's going to see play too much in competitive, but I guess in general, it's just like, it's good to have options, right? Good to make, like, builds good, right? As opposed to having one completely thrown in the dumpster, which is kind of what happened to Condi Rev. Unlucky Condi Rev. Unlucky. You do actually have the other thing that you can do with Rev is that you have a very strong condition transfer. So in any meta where there's a lot of condis about the place, you can like really punish that by brutally transferring everything back. So that's, you know, worth noting there. It's kind of like an anti-condi build. It's a condi anti-condi build, right? Kind of worth noting. As we talked about previously, you no longer get quickness on your Draconic Echo activation, like you do in PvE. You get Might. It's 1 stack of Might, so not really a big deal. But hey, I mean, free Might, right? Nothing wrong with that. It's still not bad. You know, it's worse than nothing. It's better than nothing, right? But yeah, quickness, probably not super good to be spamming out all over the place. You know, particularly in World vs. World, where Herald is already excellent anyway and has excellent boon support right off the bat. So yeah, there you go. It's good enough as it is. Right, now I get some Might. Hooray. You love to see it. Fantastic stuff. It really is good content, guys. Good content. Yeah. They're just trying to... A big theme with these changes is they're trying to tune down how many things builds can do. Right? They were like, oh, you can do everything. No, you're going to have to choose. You can't do everything. Right? You can't give quickness, stability, and might, and pro, and fury, and everything, and do a zillion damage. Right? You can't do all of that. You just can't do it. It's no good. All right. Let's go ahead and go big. Let's do this. So, Vindicator. The single dodge that Vindicator has access to has been a long-standing point of negative feedback. True. And basically, TLDR, half the energy. The dodges are all weaker, of course, to kind of compensate for being able to dodge twice. And the dodge is twice as fast. Just, let's talk about gameplay here. This is a million times more fun. Right? Flat out. Before we talk about balance, it is a million times more fun. Okay? The really long dodge was so unfun to use, and honestly so unfun to play against as well, that even if this ends up being a bit busto, I'm kind of okay with it, at least to start off with. Because it just wasn't fun. Nobody liked it, right? I think there's a danger here. There is a danger. Dodge mechanics are powerful. Very powerful. I like how we've got the ominous music. This could be scary. It's going to depend on the balancing and the tweaking of how Vindicator is. This means that you can't punish a Vindicator for dodging as much. You're going to have to count their dodges and so on. It's a little spooky. We're going to have to kind of really see how this plays out. Vindicator right now, pretty bad in PvP, right? The support Vindicator is kind of interesting. It kind of like mega blasts healing in World vs. World, like mega healing, mega barrier. Kind of cool. Doesn't really have like crazy boon access, of course. So there kind of is that. I'm DC'd. I'm going back in. But I think, you know, Heal Rev is one of those things that Heal Vindicator in particular got completely deleted in PvE because it doesn't give alacrity anymore, which is pretty sad. And you have to pick between boons and healing pretty much, or like a large part of your healing and barrier application. Bit of a mess there. I think that the Power Vindicator build really likes this. It means that you don't have to spam all your dodges. You still have an evade left over. It's going to be a lot more fun to play. So I think this really helps out Power Vindicator a fair bit, actually, to be a lot more fun and engaging build for PvE, and just makes it more easier to balance around, I'd say, in PvP. Having only one dodge is a massive punish, particularly if it's a very expensive dodge. Even if you can kind of refill your endurance a bit with your energy meld, which has now been nerfed to half a dodge, 25 energy, not 50, by the way, as you might expect. Even though they've done that, it still has the potential to be a little bit scary, because things that do stuff when they dodge historically have been pretty busted, although not impossible to balance. A great example would be something like Evasive Arcana, right? On, you know, the Arcane trait line in Elementalist is a dodge trait that is pretty harmless and actually pretty engaging and fun. So yeah, there you go. Yeah. And Awakening is now an instant cast ability, and this, what is this? This is a AoE stun break, essentially. And again, we're just seeing this normalization of AoE stun breaks on all these classes. And this is on the Alliance stance, specifically the Kurzik side of Alliance stance. So now you can stun break your allies. You can play like Alliance stance, and then you can play, say, I don't know, like Ventari, and be like a support Vindicator, and like, boom, mega heal people. You're probably going to want to go with Jalis, though, right? That's the thing. You kind of want the stability there. But, you know, decisions, right? Maybe you want stability. Maybe you want stun breaks. Maybe you want Ventari. Who knows? A lot of variety there, a lot of choices. Kind of plays into the inherent limitation of Revenant not being able to fine-tune its utility skills quite as much. But yeah, definitely opens up some other really cool options there as well, making some of these skills a little bit better, making these stun breaks stronger with bigger radiuses, makes them a lot more usable, makes them a bit more playable there for Vindicator and World vs. World, and of course, well, not PvP because it's World vs. World only. But yeah, cool changes to Vindicator. I do like it. You know, we'll have to see if it's busted or not, okay? Like, you know, there could be, Doom could be coming to us. We've got to talk about Specter. Specter mains, you might want to sit down. In all game modes. Just take a seat. You know, take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Just get ready. Specter kind of took a massive beating this patch. Now, of course, Specter in PvP, very busto, very disgusting, insane in basically every regard. Mobility, 1v1s, support, tankiness, damage, everything. It's the Omega PvP spec. In fact, you run like 3 of them in monthly ATs. That's how good it was. Broken. Shadow Shroud health scaling from 1.5 to 0.69 all game modes. Ouch! So this significantly reduces the sustainability of Specter, right, in all game modes. Now, obviously, being tanky is not a crazy big deal in PvE, but just to kind of talk about PvE, it's worth noting that one of the things that is why I rate Specter at an absolute S-tier hyper omega busto build is because of its interaction with Shroud and Consume Shadows. In other words, the Consume Shadows trait, just so everyone's up to speed, when you drop out of Shroud, it eats all of your Shroud and heals allies in a large 600 radius equal to 50% more or less most of the time of that Shroud, and then overheals people with Barrier. This made Alacrity Specter absurd. You would like heal as much as a healer. It made even DPS Specter do this, particularly with the Carrion build or the Ritualist DPS build. Absolutely crazy. And this is a little bit over a half, right? We've chopped it down by over a half. Is it still good? Yes. In PvE. This is in PvE. Yes. In PvE, yes. You're still going to be healing a tasty amount. And if you're already, if you're at full health, it's a juicy barrier. Right? It's just not broken. I would actually categorize that interaction as semi-broken. Incredibly strong. Probably too strong. This might be a little bit heavy-handed for PvE. Right? I'm willing to say that. We could maybe just budge up a little bit. Maybe to 0.75, for example. Maybe 0.8. I wouldn't go much higher than that, though, actually. Because it really is strong. It really is. Even if you get to, like, a relatively high number. Or relatively like, low number. It's still very, very powerful. So we could maybe see a few tweaks in PvE to this. But this was absolutely necessary in PvP, right? This trait, or rather this build, was absolutely disgusting and was way too tanky for what it does, right? And I had some kind of feedback on this from some thieves in the chat. I'm definitely a little bit skeptical if Specter can do super well. Now, it's definitely going to be much more relegated to the traditional thief role of kind of running around. You're going to have to take 1v1s way harder, right? It's going to be way more difficult to kind of have these sustained, protracted battles because you're just so much squishier. You're going to get hunted down by Revs, by Untames, by Soul Beasts running around all over the place hunting you down, right? It's going to be way harder to survive on Specter. Even if you play a tanky build like the Condition build, the Carrion build. Power build, honestly, good luck, to be honest. Because bear in mind, you have a lot less access to stealth on the Specter build. You typically spec into aggressive trait lines rather than defensive ones. So maybe we see a different build evolve out of this, but ouch. This is going to massively reduce the play rate of Specters in PvP for sure. We'll have to see if it stays in the meta. After all, Thief is really good. I'd be surprised if there wasn't some variant of Thief. And bear in mind, its damage is untouched. So you're still going to be absolutely devastating in some of these team fights. Sorry, in some of these, like, +1 scenarios, like, boom, kill, right? Move over and kill. Focus down a player, right? You're still going to deliver value in these scenarios, but you're going to be so much easier to focus. And bear in mind, Spectre is already somewhat easy to focus. The reason it survives is because of that Shroud application there as well. Whew. Yeah, it is going to be tough. It's going to be interesting to see if it actually stays in play, or if maybe we see Deadeye kind of take over, because Deadeye is like a really strong Thief spec right now. You know, it sees play in monthly AT finals. We may simply see a much more Deadeye-oriented meta, right, in PvP. We may see Spectre fall off a bit. And Deadeye takes over as that Thief build that is going to be like the mega rotator that activates. So, bust out your rifle. Let's go. So another thing that happened with Spectre as well is that Well of Bounty, instead of it was kind of a fun effect. It would kind of like top up your boons, fill in gaps in your boons. It's kind of a fun, interesting ability, you know, special skill. But now it's going to actually have a definitive boon order, right? You get stability, then might, then fury, then vigor, then resistance. Now that is very nice actually for PvE. Because that means that Thief, Alacrity Specter, or of course DPS Specter, if you kind of slot the skill in, which you maybe don't want to do, to be fair, on DPS, but you could, you now have access to stability. Very, very nice. That's nice. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's tasty. So, that means you're going to be popping out stability kind of in your rotation. Makes it a little bit hard to use in PvE, but it's nice to have that there, right? Like, you could delay it a little bit. You know, you could use it at a special time. Resistance, too. Super fun, actually. This really gives you some good boon access, actually, on Specter, right? Now we've got Stab. We've got even more... You've got a bit more Might, which was definitely lacking in, by the way. More Fury, more Vigor, and more Resistance. Very nice, actually. A very powerful skill. And the goal here is to try and make Specter a thing in Zerg play, right? You know, or more of a presence in team scenarios for PvP and World versus World. You did run well a bounty in PvP, and you probably still will. So that's nice, I guess, to have that. But the cooldown is going up a lot. And that, honestly, the cooldown goes up so much that actually makes it a lot less attractive, I think, in PvP. Because one of the things that was so good about this was that it was like a port skill. You get Shadow Force from that. You also get access to, you know, a teleport. You heal a little bit. So it was a very versatile ability. The cooldown going up actually makes it a lot more attractive, I think, with that one. The same in World vs. World, although this is because they don't want you to be spamming stability left and right? So that's kind of like the trade-off that you're paying there. But yeah, very cool in PvE, I think, actually. So, you know, PvE kind of getting in here a little bit, guys. Kind of getting in here. We'd love to see that. Very good. And there's one thing here that's actually worth talking about. There's a really weird interaction in PvP and World vs. World, I guess any game mode actually, where Shallow Grave will actually revive Elementalists in Vapor form. Because what it does is, when you go down state, it reses you basically. It kind of juices you, right? With all the Shadow Force, and then revives an ally, right? Now, or like basically prevents them from going down and reses them. That's what it does. And fully heals them. Well, heals them with the Shroud. Now, the weird thing about this is that Elementalist downstate, you go downstate, you use your Vapor form, that actually counts as a revive. So you get up, you move around, and then you go downstate again. But you're invulnerable during that. So the weird thing here was that you could Vapor form as an Ellie, a Specter tethers you, right? And then when you go downstate again after your Vapor form, that counts, triggers the trait, and then revives you, right, essentially. This was a bit unfun to deal with, and a bit weird and gimmicky. That interaction has been removed. And in fact, we also know that that trait in general is being toned down in competitive modes, right? So that's another, and funny enough, one of the really strong things was that Specter had a really good synergy with Ellie, which is actually doubly in the meta right now, with both Catalyst and Tempest being highly meta. So that was a god-level synergy to actually have. It was a 300-second cooldown, but honestly, a revive every 300 seconds was pretty wild, to be honest. I'm not gonna lie. A few traits got changed. Of course, Instant Reflex, which is the 300-second Thief trait, gives you evasion after using an elite skill. I think this is not actually super usable. Good for the Shadowfall, for example, and it actually applies after Daggerstorm, giving you a bit more evasion afterwards. They did some clever tech with a lot of these traits. The traits are kind of intelligent. When you activate on your heal, it kind of activates the way you'd want it to. So instead of kind of stacking the evasion with Daggerstorm, it gives you evasion afterwards. You know, when you use your Basilisk Venom, you use your Shadowfall, you'll get in there and boom, you're evading while you're in your Shadowfall, right? Very cool RP. I mean, this is worth noting that this is Acrobatics, which is, you know, a pretty meh trait line. Just in general. Same with, you know, hard to catch here as well. You gain endurance when you're shadow stepping. Could be kind of interesting with some kind of Specter build, right? Because you're kind of healing when you shadow step. You're also getting endurance when you shadow step, so you can get some extra evasion by spamming all of that. But I mean, I'm not really seeing it, to be honest here. Could be interesting if, you know, with some kind of Deadeye setup, maybe, actually, with this kind of stuff. And yeah, meld with shadows, reduce super speed duration from 2 to 1.5 in PvP only. This is basically actually a very targeted nerf. CMC mentioned it's very targeted towards Deadeye, because Deadeye is pretty beastly, actually. It is pretty monstrous. I'm not gonna lie, actually. But you know what? I actually need to, you know, Left has said something really interesting in the chat. More out of combat traits on for restricted record mobility. Indeed, you will have. And you just reminded me about something, actually. You really reminded me about something important that I forgot to talk about Rev. Rev also actually now gets its sigil swap back on when you swap legends too, which is like a really well-loved change, I think, in every game mode, funnily enough, actually. And now you have that back, right? So yeah, enjoy. Enjoy that, my friends. Embrace it. But, you know, what interested me, and the reason Left reminded me about this was because, okay, let's not beat about the bush. That was a change made by the last balance team. And it was just outright, like, removed, right? Like, they removed it, but now CMC has said, actually, this is intended, and it was always intended, which is quite funny because the previous developer said the opposite. Now, and this is really random. This is really, really random to say this, actually, but, no. I wonder if they would actually remove some of, like, the and the reason, I got reminded this because Left is a big speedrunner. I wonder if they would actually revert, like, the out of, the changing your trait, like, resets all of your boons. Because that was also kind of made by the last balance leader. The boon furnace. I wonder if CMC would actually revert that change, so you in fact keep your boons when you move your abilities. That's a very, very interesting one, actually. A very interesting thought there. Just brought up there, just a random thought, guys, because I was reminded by the speed man himself, Left in the chat. But there you go. Definitely one to keep an eye on there. And I think finally, we're on Warrior. And goodness me, as you can see here, Warrior is the star of the show this time around. And in particular, Berserker, actually. And in fact, I want to start with Berserker. Because Berserker got juiced. Holy shit. Especially in PvP. This build actually might be terrifying. I'm just going to say this, right? Like, day one, you're going to see Boyce on this build. He might be unhinged. He actually might be totally unhinged. It's possible. So, 1, Berserk, instant activation now. 2, right, you get your F1 back as well. This baseline there as well. Boom. Okay, it no longer initiates an attack. It now counts as a rage skill instead of a level 3 burst. So it's kind of, they basically reverted the change. Like, the old Berserker rework has been totally reverted there as well. Ooh. So, what this means is you just have a lot more versatility, right? A lot more utility in the way that Berserker is going to be able to play, right? You're not totally reliant on Berserk now. In PvE, you can actually use your Immobilize on your sword if you want to, for example. You can use all of the skills, right? You can use your, like, CC. You can use your Skullcrack if you want to instead of a Skull Grinder, etc., etc., etc. So just a big usability increase. And yeah, this is PvE as well. This is global. And there are a lot of pretty fun changes here to Berserker. And a lot of synergies to talk about across all of these trait lines as well. So one of the things that just is always a concern with Warrior in general, but I think definitely with Berserker, was adrenaline generation. And oh boy, have ArenaNet hit that hard. All the rage skills, boom. Now, they still extend your Berserk, just not as much. But you now gain a lot of adrenaline, right? 10 adrenaline on Blood Reckoning, 10 adrenaline on Outrage, 10 adrenaline on Shattering Blow, etc., etc., etc. And you don't lose stability on Headbutt anymore. Now, weirdly enough, there's a really weird interaction here in PvE, because you actually want to stun yourself in PvE because you can extend your Berserk using Outrage even more. Very weird interaction, but that actually is a thing. So this might actually end up being weird in PvE because you want to stun yourself, but everywhere else, massive usability increase here. It's also worth noting that the Berserk extension is staying the same in PvE because obviously that's kind of how it plays out there, right? You really want that extension to get the most out of all of your Primal Burst abilities and so on like that. So that's kind of the direction over there. And we also have some other kind of tweaks to the weapon skills on Berserker. We have 3 conditions removed by Flames of War in PvP and World vs. World, and double ammo and a blast finisher on Blazebreaker. That's actually really cool. So what's interesting about this is that now you're going to get some potentially free might output, right? Because you're going to, you have a blast finisher, and you have 2 of them in PvP and World of Warcraft for some free AoE might. Also kind of nice in PvE too. A little extra might never hurt anyone. You could also, you know, blast someone else's field, for example, and use that as a combo interactor. And it was said on the stream that the goal here is to kind of have like a double dual wield set on Berserker. So maybe you would go with like a Mace Torch, right? Or you'd have like Mace Torch, Mace Sword, or, you know, something like that. Or maybe Sword Torch and then Mace Sword. I don't know. They want you to kind of mix it. Or maybe with a shield there, right? Because shield is probably non-negotiable in PvP, so maybe you would have like a mace shield and like a sword torch setup or something like that. Something like that. Some kind of different thing. And you can see that that's kind of the goal they're going for there, because they buff Flaming Flurry's DPS, or rather its projectile speed, so it's easy to land those abilities. Fatal Frenzy no longer reduces toughness. That's in all game modes, by the way. So Berserker 1v1 builds, just breathe a sigh of relief. You're going to get farmed by getting +1. You're going to be way more durable everywhere you are because of that. 300 toughness is a really big deal. Really nice in PvE too. A lot more durable. Dead or Alive, the 300-second trait, you gain 2 seconds of Blood Reckoning while you're entering Berserk. That means when you enter Berserk, you kind of get like a free heal almost, because some of your damage gets converted into healing whenever you go into Berserk. Really fun trait, by the way, actually. Super strong. And Bloody Roar, you now grant resistance when entering Berserk in addition to its other effects. You get less damage, but you get resistance now instead, which is amazing because resistance is huge for being able to, you know, move around and not get snared and not get caught. I think it's really cool roleplay. You're like unstoppable. You go in Berserk, you have super speed now, you have more attack speed, you know, you get quickness, and you get resistance too. You're like totally unstoppable juggernaut running around like zerging everything down. So good, actually. Obviously, like, you know, kind of nice in World versus World too, because, you know, you're going to be tankier, right? You can potentially go in for resistance so you don't get slowed down as much. You can steal more life and be really durable, right? Really fun, right? Yeah, you're not weakened, you're not blinded. Honestly, that is terrifying, right? You can't blind the Skull Grinder now. You know, well, as we see later, you might have stability as well. Oh man. Berserker is going to be really spicy in PvP. That's for sure. Kind of in that duelist position, for sure. Like, definitely stay tuned for this one. Definitely stay tuned for this. Goodness me. But anyway, and we kind of see the follow-up to this, actually, in the defense trait line. So, in the defense trait line here, we see that Shieldmaster, you gain Adrenaline instead of Might. So, again, that really helps you kind of juice up and charge up and use more of your burst skills, which is really nice, by the way, because, well, you're about to see. Adrenal Health now grants 1 stack of Adrenal Health plus 1 stack per bar of Adrenaline. So why does that matter? Well, Berserker Primal Bursts count as a level 1 burst. So you get 1 Adrenal Health. But hang on. Now, we're going to get 2 Adrenal Healths, and it stacks up to 4. So in other words, instead of having to use 3 Primal Bursts to get up to 3 stacks of Adrenal Health, oh, hang on. Now, we only need to use 2 as well. Ooh. That's pretty exciting, huh? Now, of course, they made the healing the same, right? They nerfed the healing down to match the extra stack, basically. So it's not like, oh, you just get a free extra stack, right? That's not how it works. But this means that you get your Adrenal Health stacked up much quicker as your Berserker and really helps out your sustain with this trait line overall. But that's not all, my friends, okay? It's not over, okay? Stalwart Strength. Disabling an enemy grants stability. Oh, hang on. Gain resistance at the end of your dodge roll with Resilient Roll. Goodness me. More resistance and stability as well. Bear in mind, on Berserker, you've got Headbutt, you've got Shield Bash, you've got Skull Grinder. These are the really kind of key trademark skills of the Berserker. You're going to be a monster, right? You're an actual beast. Like when you play this build. Because again, this trait, Stalwart Strength doesn't have a cooldown either. It's got like a 1/4 second internal cooldown. So, you know, it's like every time you use the skill and you actually land it, you're going to get that. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Crazy. And of course now you can take Merciless Hammer as well, which will give you even more Adrenaline, which means whenever you land, I believe when you land a Disable, I think, you will actually just flat out gain Adrenaline as well. Right. Nice. Nice. Very nice. It's worth noting that Cleansing Eye also got the same treatment. So as Adrenal Health, so you get 1 baseline, then 1 per bar. So instead of 1 Condi removed by a Berserker Primal Burst, it will be 2 instead. Of course, the same, the normal rules apply to regular burst skills as well. But that is a big deal. So, just think about this. Of course, it is a Grandmaster trait, so you're going to have to kind of pick and choose between Stalwart Strength and Cleansing Eye. Is worth noting about that, of course. But there's some pretty spicy stuff here. There's a few options for Berserker builds. The thing is, I very much doubt you're going to drop... I mean, is there any version of Reality where you drop Discipline? I mean, Discipline is pretty good, guys. It's, pretty strong. Tends to work out pretty well for warrior builds. It's, tends to be how it goes. Honestly, I don't really know. I think this is really going to shake things up. I think you could see some really spicy builds popping up out of this, actually. Particularly with some of the other defense traits that got reworked, guys. Here we go. Yeah, Core Warrior, maybe. You could fit all 3 in and go with Core. Then you can get even more trait lines in. You can have, like, Defense. Oh, man. Although, honestly, to be fair, Berserker is not going to be ideal, to be honest. But Defy Pain. This is the 300-second trait alongside Last Stand and Defense. This trait no longer grants lesser endure pain when dropping below 50% health. Instead, it grants lesser endure pain after using an elite skill. Headbutt has a 20-second cooldown, guys. It has a 20-second cooldown. And you get kind of like 2 seconds of endure pain. This is crazy. This is actually insane. That's pretty hot, guys. It's a lot of damage mitigation that you can kind of rack up by continuously using this. And of course, it's a much better than having like a really boring passive as well, right? That's lame. Not so good on other elite skills, of course, like Rampage and so on, but still kind of nice. You can Rampage and go crazy. Then Last Stand, the other 300-second trait, you gain Barrier and Vigor when you use a stance. You get the Barrier at the end of defensive stances, basically. So in other words, ones that you don't want the Barrier up front. Defiant stance, you get the Barrier at the end, and same with Endure Pain. That's kind of fun in that regard, and you gain the Vigor, so kind of a nice little tech there to make sure that this trait actually operates really nicely and kind of makes sense with the way it is used. It's a decent amount of Barrier and will certainly give you some sustain over time as well. And Vigor is also really good because Vigor gives you that additional evasion, which is really important in these kind of PvP competitive game modes. So Last Stand, actually now a good trait. It's good to see all those 300-second traits die, It really, really is. Thick Skin, you gain prot when you use a healing skill. Very, very tasty, actually. It used to be like you take less damage over the health threshold. Now you just have protection, so you have more access to additional defensive capacities and reducing your power, reducing power damage taken. Really, really good there, particularly as it's a minor trait. It's a really nice thing to have. Berserker's power basically got the same treatment as like all the other like burst skills, right? You gain, it's 4 stacks now, but you kind of get a double stack, right, for using a primal burst, and you get like potentially up to 4 stacks in one go from using a regular burst skill there as well. Really fun skills, actually. Cull the Weak. Also, this is a surprisingly strong addition here as well. This no longer applies weakness when striking an enemy below 50% health. Instead, it applies weakness when striking an enemy with a burst skill. Ooh, yeah. I mean, obviously, you have to land your burst skill, but holy shit. This can be absolutely disgusting if you land this on certain bursts. Like, think how much weakness that is going to be. Ugh. Ugh. That is gnarly, dude. Holy shit. It's so much weakness spam. It's going to be a lot of fun to play against this, guys. Right? A lot of fun to play. And by the way, we're not even done yet. We've got so much more to talk about Warrior, right? All of our, bear in mind, guys, because we're not getting cooldown reduction in a trait. Oh, yeah. That means all of our skills actually get at baseline, right? Mace cooldowns are down in PvP and World vs. World because you don't have a trait anymore. Hammer Shock, all the a bunch of hammer abilities, they're going down because we don't have the trait anymore because we removed that. Pommel Bash, same thing there as well. So we just have more ability, more access to using these abilities here in these PvP game modes. Very, very spicy. Okay, yeah, exactly. It's more cover combis for Skull Grinder. Okay, that is... I like that. That's going to be fun. It's... I'd be scared. You see a Berserker coming at you, you run away in pure terror, my friends. You absolutely do. Oh, man. Yeah, just to be clear, Rousing Resilience was replaced by this stability trait too. So again, this is in the defense trait line. So the Grandmaster traits and the defense trait lane are really, really powerful, actually. Really powerful. But that's kind of like most of the stuff here for Berserker. They made a slight usability improvement to the Berserker Hammer burst Rupturing Smash. Basically now it's like a flat AoE, right? It's a 2-second daze in PvP in World vs. World. And bonus, it's just like giant AoE. Much easier to land, much more usable, and still has all of that goodness there with the other effects that it brings to the table. Additionally, Hammer actually got some damage back. Check this out. Earthshaker actually does damage now. 0.682 power coefficient in PvP in World vs. World. I think that Hammer in particular will probably see a few more changes like this because, of course, Hammer is a super weird weapon now because almost all of its abilities are crowd control. So none of them do damage, which is weird. So yeah, there you go. They also made some buffs to support warrior for PvP. As you can see, we have Charge has 3 seconds of quickness in PvP, and the barrier on Call of Valor goes up to 2.5k. It's the base barrier, which is interesting, because this means that any other build that might want to use a ward, like Bladesworn, for example, can now also, gain benefit out of having additional barrier. Pretty interesting stuff. We saw an Axe 5 Whirling Axe nerf in World vs. World. Big reason for this is because it does a lot of damage. It really does. And Warrior is a key part of the World vs. World meta and hits really hard. So again, just shooting that damage down a little bit, particularly when we're nerfing supports too, makes some sense. Skullcrack gets some damage as well in PvP in World vs. World, kind of leaning into that Berserker thing potentially. Although, you'll be leaning towards Skull Grinder, I think, a lot of the time. With Skullcrack. Really fun change here is actually to shake it off. So the ammo is gone, but to compensate, the cooldown's down to 30, and it's a stun break. Now, that's actually game, that's PvE too, by the way. That actually is pretty nice. That means you can, potentially use it in situations where you have like an incoming fear or an incoming CC. You can break your allies out with Shout Radius. There's a 600 radius. Really powerful effect to have that, by the way. It's funny because you can already kind of do this with resistance on areas like Harvest Temple CM to make you immune to the fear, but you can also just outright break people out of stuns with this. Honestly, this probably works out being really, really good. So the only sad thing is that you're not ammo anymore, so you don't kind of have like a backup. You have to use all of your skill in one go, as opposed to being able to save it. But slashing the cooldown over in half down to 30, honestly probably makes it better. Right, overall. This is a very strong skill. It's a quadruple condition cleanse and a stun break. Oh yeah, that is absolutely tasty. Very, very tasty indeed. And it kind of makes you, less punished. Or kind of like, you don't run out of steam as much, right? Like, the thing about Warrior right now is that it has this kind of quirk where, oh, after the double shake it off is gone, oh dear, you haven't got a stun break and Condi cleanse for a long time. Oh no, that's unfortunate for you, isn't it? So that's kind of the thing that's going on there. And yeah, there you go. Shake it off. Pretty good. And yeah, of course, you can even trait that as well and reduce the cooldown even further to 24 seconds. That is monstrous. It really is. Signet of Rage got buffed. Is it going to be good? I mean, probably not. Not going to lie, guys. There's some pretty good elite skills for Warrior right now, Support Warrior is going to run the banner. Berserker is very likely to run Headbutt. Spellbreaker is going to run Rampage, almost certainly, on that build. And, of course, you'll run Winds of Disenchantment in World vs. World. So, nothing really going on there, to be honest with you. But, yeah, it is what it is. It is what it is. And in the Merciless Hammer, Merciless Hammer kind of got shuffled around. It basically got moved, right? Just again, we kind of talked about this already, but it got moved over to Strength, I believe. This is Aggressive Onslaught is the new GM trait in Strength. And good news. This means you gain quickness when you land a CC. And you go faster while you have quickness. And funnily enough, this actually stacks with other movement speed increases. So basically, you go faster than swiftness if you have this, right? When you're in combat anyway, right? That's kind of a fun ability to have there. Now, of course, if you're going to run this and you want to run like the Omega Synergy, which would obviously be Aggressive Onslaught and Stalwart Strength, well, yeah, quickness and stability on CC does sound pretty cool, but of course that is a pretty severe commitment to trait lines, right? You're going to have to commit to strength and to defense there. It does leave you without discipline if you're playing on Berserker. So that, we'll see, we'll see. But there's definitely some pretty spooky stuff here. Could be a lot of synergy built in here. And of course, it's not all about Berserker, right? For example, Spellbreaker does like the strength trait line, right? And Spellbreaker has a lot of control effects. And I think one of the goals with this patch is to bring Spellbreaker a little bit back into play in PvP. Specifically, because we see an increased daze on full counter in PvP. We see Breaching Strike go up in damage a bit, Aura Slicer go up in damage, and the days go up on Disrupting Stab to 1.5 seconds. And more stats on Attacker's Insight. We now gain 45 power, precision, and ferocity for each stack. Really fucking tasty. Helping you get that consistency in your critical strikes, and honestly, a good chunk of damage. More resistance uptime on Revenge Counter, making you harder to lock down, and more might duration on Magebane Tether, again, increasing the damage output of this build. So, and bear in mind, here's a fun fact. I bet a lot of you warrior mates don't know this. I was talking to the PvP nerds the other day, actually. And, fun fact, Spellbreaker actually does really fucking nicely in 1v1s right now. And, seeing as, oh boy, Bladesworn gets the hammer. Oh dear. Because of that, Spellbreaker actually ends up very fucking juicy, actually. And we'll certainly see some experimentation in the metagame, particularly with stuff like Specter getting nerfed down a little bit. A lot of the things that kind of are predators of Spellbreaker have been hit in this particular patch, and with its competition from its own self, Bladesworn getting nerfed, we'll get into that right now, it's worth noting that Spellbreaker is actually going to be a lot more attractive in the context of PvP, actually, as that, again, that duelist role that I think a lot of warrior mains really love, right? That's a very common style for the warrior fans out there. And now it's going to be a lot more attractive, actually. So definitely stay tuned for Spellbreaker in the next patch, because these changes are big, actually. Significant crowd control, more damage, resistance, your competition getting nerfed. Hey, don't you love it when that happens, right? More might, and of course, some excellent changes to some of the trait lines, including strength, which might give you access, potentially, to landing some more stuff with quickness. Although you'll have to give up Might Makes Right for that, which is a bit of a blow to take that, because it is indeed that Grandmaster slot, but we'll see. Quickness is pretty damn good. It really is. It really, really, really is good. And yeah, you're exactly right? The enemy of Warrior has and always is blind, right? Being able to, put blind on a Warrior is pain, because all of your attacks are, one big attack. So blinding you is really, really annoying. So having that resistance shuts that down, right? Because, of course, resistance makes you immune to blind temporarily, letting you land your abilities much easier with that. Now, the thing here, of course, is that Revenge Counter does compete with Magebane Tether, so you can't have both of those. You're going to have to have that pull or have the resistance, but it definitely makes it a little bit more, a little bit more competitive there for sure. But there's a lot of resistance on Warrior in general, right? You have resistance on the defense trait line as well, for example, on your dodge roll. So there's a lot of things that you can do to actually counter this. It'll be very interesting to see the builds that emerge from this. So, Bladesworn. The hammer. The hammer that CMC gave to Berserker and gave to Warrior. It has landed on the Bladesworn. Utter annihilation here. 1, the Dragon Trigger bug got fixed. And you might go, oh, that's a bug fix. I agree with you, it's a bug fix, but it made Bladesworn way more mobile. Basically, you could do some really funky stuff with stowing. Well, I guess you technically still can. And you can basically use it on a very, very short cooldown, basically like the interrupt cooldown, right? And go and zoom around really fast, right? You could use your Dragon Trigger way more often than you're supposed to be able to, basically. That's a big nerf in of itself. That's actually a huge nerf. Second, Tactical Reload. This skill now only recharges Bladesworn skills instead of all Warrior ammunition skills. So, why is this a big deal? Because, well, shouts have ammo on Bladesworn, right? On Warrior. So, you could get your stun break back. You could get your healing back, right? Because you would take the tactics trait line and have your shouts heal you, right? And have a reduced cooldown. Tactical Reload not resetting that is boom! Annihilation. This probably kills Bladesworn. At least, it kills the current build for sure in PvP. Which, I'm not going to lie, guys, good riddance. It was a bit of a menace, to be honest. It was a bit of a very unfun build to play against. So it definitely had this one coming in that regard. And the thing is here is it gives ArenaNet a lot more design space with actually buffing Bladesworn and making things better. An ability like this is scary, right? It is very limiting on what you can do, because anything that fully resets your cooldowns and all of your abilities from your entire class is pretty busto. Now it's a lot more sane. It's going to, it's going to be like all of your gun saber abilities. That allows them to make them better, for example, and more exciting. Make this skill have a lower cooldown maybe or something like that, right? Have those ones have a lower cooldown. It essentially allows them to balance the game in a way that doesn't just say, okay, we're going to have to make this ability bad because it's just badly designed. It's just broken, right? But yeah, this is a brutal nerf combined with that bug fix. And we also have Dragon Scale Defense. It gives protection instead of stability in PvP and World vs. World, and the internal cooldown is now 15 seconds in PvP and World vs. World. This is just much better design, to be honest. It means that giving stability on such a short cooldown is probably a bit busted in PvP and World vs. World, just not very healthy because of the way the game works. Making it prop means it can have a lower cooldown, make it much more interactive and much more engaging. Like the Catalyst Elite. The Catalyst Elite is only the weapon skills of your current attunement. I agree that is a dangerous skill, though you're absolutely right, Magical Cow. It is a dangerous skill, but nowhere near as dangerous as Tactical Reload. Tactical Reload resets all of your ammo, right? Or rather, it gives you an ammo on all of your ammo skills, including core skills, Bladesworn skills, everywhere where they are, whereas the Ellie one is much more limited. Yeah, much more limited. But yeah, I think Bladesworn is pretty oofed right now. I mean, is it going to be playable? I mean, yeah, no shit, right? It's not going to be, like, unplayable. Particularly seeing as they did actually buff Warhorn a bit, which is nice to help it sustain itself, because it will kind of lose healing from spamming its shouts. It will get a little bit of barrier back from Warhorn there too. Maybe you can look into some of the other trait lines and hold on there a little bit, I suppose. But in general, I think it's good that Bladesworn's gone. It's kind of a bit of a unfun build to play against right now, very uninteractive because of all the shout spamming that happens in PvP. So good riddance. Yeah, it does affect Pistol 5, yeah. It's also worth noting here that I will actually say this, and this is why you should definitely watch the stream with CMC, is that CMC said they don't want to make Bladesworn bad. He specifically said that if this like kills Bladesworn, they're going to buff it. So just, that is worth noting, because these changes might seem very intense, and when you log in to play your Bladesworn in PvP on the 4th, you might go, ooh, this doesn't feel very good. So be aware of it, that they are actually going to buff it if it ends up being, like, nuked from orbit, right? So be aware of that. CMC is unchained. Fully unchained, indeed. And yeah, this is going to affect PvE as well. You know, I was expecting Heal Warrior to get buffed, but this is a PvP patch and World vs. World patch, and I guess, you know, Tactical Reload, this actually makes, in some ways, I guess it makes Heal Warrior worse in PvE, because you can't reload your shouts, but then you kind of have to run banners anyway, and you wanted to run the res banner, probably. So it doesn't really make a lot of difference. I think we'll see a lot of Heal Warrior changes, and probably Heal Mesmer changes in the next patch in November. But yeah, there you go. There you go. You love to see it. That's basically everything covered, I believe. Goodness me. What a patch. Wow. That is big. I mean, it's been a little while since we saw some stuff to PvP and World vs. World, but wow. This is pretty wild. This is going to completely shake up PvP, completely shake up World vs. World, I think, in the best way possible, right? I love it. What a good patch. Okay, I think there are definitely some winners here, definitely some losers too, that will probably need to be addressed down the line, but an amazing update there. Really well done here by CMC, right? And, Roy for presenting that there as well. Really excited. And I think looking at this patch, we're seeing some really radical changes, some big changes, right, across the board. And also a shift in philosophy, right? Moving away from kind of unfun trade-offs and elite specializations, fixing the design of 300-second cooldowns there as well is really exciting. This should get you hyped up as hell for the next big patch in November for PvE, guys, because, of course, this was competitive with a few kind of PvE things kind of falling through just as a bit of a bonus there as well. But, wow, you should be very hyped here, guys. This is going to be a really exciting time for skill balance in Guild Wars 2. It really looks like ArenaNet here are absolutely looking to take balance seriously and really take this to task and get the job done. Very nice. Very, very nice. I like the design on these changes too. That's the good news. They are well-designed changes. And they're not holding back. They're activating. We're here to do some big stuff and shake things up, which is exactly, by the way, what a balance change should do. So, that's going to kind of round things out for this balance review, balance update here. Make sure that you leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, and actually hop on my Discord. We'll have a discussion thread talking about this. And the really key thing here is give feedback, right? Give feedback. Let's talk about this. Another thing that CMC mentioned is that there will be some tuning, maybe. That, you know, if they think that, oh yeah, we were a little bit wrong here, there will be some tuning. So give feedback. Have some productive discussions. Point out some issues, right? You know, or say, hey, this is really good. This is really bad. I don't like this. I like this, right? All that kind of stuff. Super important. Actually, let's get a good discourse going. Don't get crazy. Don't get fully unhinged. And let's have a good time. Really excited for the future of balance here in Guild Wars 2. October 4th. Very, very spicy indeed. Stay tuned, my friends, for more. But yeah, that's it from me now on YouTube anyway. Follow and subscribe. Come back and watch. Watch on Twitch. Go on YouTube. Watch the other videos. I don't know. Join my Discord. Go on Twitter. Follow my Twitter. Do all these things. You know, you know, these are all things that you could be doing while you're complaining about the balance patch. It's just fantastic. It really is. Yep. Oh no! Oh no! I forgot! Gamers, the change so stealthy that even I forgot. Mech! 3.8k DPS nerf. It's not actually here, but the two key changes are that the ferocity conversion is less on the Mechanist now from the player, and aim-assisted rocket, which is the little, you know, rocket trait that fires out orbital strikes and rockets, no longer activates on your mech. You know, the boffins, the PvE boffins have already worked this out. It's going to be a 3.8k, roughly, DPS nerf, taking Power Mechanist from around 37,000 DPS down to kind of like the 33,000, that sort of range there. 33k. This means that, good news, Power Mech actually still really strong. I actually expect them to nerf it a little bit more in the next patch, actually. But do not worry, Power Mech enjoys. It's still really good. All of its damage is still ranged, fairly passive across the board. And it's got a good number on it, alongside great utility, good sustainability, and all the usual Mechanist stuff. So, Mech enjoyers, don't worry. Mech, still very, very good, actually. Not bad at all. It will still be a very potent option as a damage, you know, if you're fancying a kind of a very nice, cozy, relaxed state of gameplay. So there you go. A little bit of a bonus meme. Even I forgot about that. The God Emperor finally has encountered the first setback in PvE. So there you go. But yeah, no worries about Mech, guys. Mech, still very, very good. Very, very good indeed. But nerfed. And again, expect to see more. That probably ain't over. Yeah, it was only mentioned on the stream. It doesn't look like it's made it into the notes. So it's not here, but it was there. There you go. Very nice. The hidden change. The secret change.